The Johnny Pilkington rinnedas na hamána a bear sa tír sta nóchadí.
Johnny Pilkington has come alive.
Éon lá a chuaigh Johnny Pilkington chun parke. Dag sé gacha bhí ina chorp a muhin sin.
Bhí cáilear chomá mar rinnedas de charachtar bevós sa sport. A lean a rialcha féin a gcónaí.
What will it mean if Offaly can win a third McCarthy Cup on Sunday?
It mean a hell of a lot of drinking, Jar.
For a fella that liked a fag and liked a pint, he could certainly get around the place.
We produced the goods, we went off the beer, we went off the cigarette, and we stayed with our own women.
Ach tá bhír don bersan dút chuideach dúil seo, bhí fearr a bhad níos móna sanna buint leis mar rinne.
I always thought on reflection with Johnny Pilkington that was just a character that maybe he played up to. I think it did consume him.
He kind of portrayed that image that, that he was happy-go-lucky and it was, party and that was it. But he was completely different. Like the real Johnny Pilkington was one of the most serious hurling men I've come across.
When you're training, that's when you're tuned in. After that, it's your own life. It's an amateur sport. It's not about the be-all and end-all of hurling. Grew up in Burr. The family had a farming business, a grocery shop and a door-to-door milk ground delivery. So even though I was born in the town, it was the countryside, the country aspect of it. So I can't really say that it was a townie and I can't really say I was from the country. There's 7 of us in the family. There's 4 girls and 3 lads. Sport would have always been naturally fairly prominent and very prominent, but because we had a farm and the businesses, there was always a lot of work to be done. So our day at home would start at maybe 4 in the morning and it'd finish at at 10 at night. So that was 6 days a week, and then the Sunday would have been the dairy, milking cows. So there was always work. We'd run cattle right through Burr Town at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. You have to kind of get ahead of the cattle. So again, we were jumping ditches, we were jumping walls, trying to outrun the cattle to get out in front of them so they wouldn't go in and tear up someone's lawn. And I think it helped all along with, say, the flexibility. I was very fortunate in say, my hurling career, that I had very few injuries.
Drastal Johnny phobal scoil de Browndown na Mira, agus léir sé láthardach greibh buan spórtige. Ach beléiro hasach, gunníonach sé rudaí ina lí féin.
He would have been pally with guys that never played, weren't on the school team. He was very much individualistic in that, and he carried that on as well, and a lot of his friends weren't GA guys at all.
Bhí machara Pádraig Horn ir chaptein agus banistóir I Bhálaí agus gan dát ir banistóir Beura ag móna sa phobal scoil I Miura. Is creibhn Pádraig a ráilm go raibh grúpa anmha ag teach le chéile I Miura.
In '85 we had lost the colleges All-Ireland, so I remember a few of the lads actually came back to repeat the Leaving Cert for the following year's hurling. It's not because they wanted to get better points in the Leaving Cert.
So we just knew Johnny kind of from coming on, this skinny young kid who seemed to be pretty good.
When we came up to the final, you have your team meeting, and again there was one other brother who had a major influence in Offaly Ireland, was brother Dennis. Now he was the principal of the community school. So in we were anyway for the team meeting prior to this, and brother Dennis of course comes in and he's given the whole speech, and then Frank Bergen turns around and He turns around, listen lads, he says, you know, this is even more important than the leaving cert, he says, you know. With Brother Dennis then piping up, we won't go as far as that now, Frank.
Agus an uair sin as spragach an gníomh, thug bíorra cornan chrócaigh le thug go héasca. Bhí Johnny tucha féinara ag granóiríonn chúntaí de bhar an bhuasan, agus an bhliain dar giún bhí sé ar an bhiniúr í fáilí a bhain clé ceannis na héir namach. An lá son, chur Johnny a féin sa bhar na bhuail ar son na fórne.
Tipperary had brought on a sub, but I remember me coming and he was standing behind me and he was pulling like mad, so he was, you know, warming up. I said, God, I'm going to get one here now, he says, anyway, you know. So, of course, the first ball that kind of came down, it happened to land between me two legs and bang, he let fly up and poleaxed me. That free resulted in hitting it off the crossbar. It came across to Seamus Morgan buried it. It was really, again, I suppose the first taste in one way of the back slapping, coming back into town, coming back into Tullamore and crowds and that.
If I could turn back time, if I could find a way.
Bhuaigh Johnny áit ar an híntear í bháilí an 1989, agus neada sé isteach na parke gan stró.
Is this to be a fourth All-Ireland final appearance in the 80s for Offaly, or perhaps a first ever for Antrim?
Johnny Pilkington looks at the post and sends it sweetly over the bar. Good score by Johnny Pilkington.
He came off the minor team and straight into the middle of the field, and you had Joachim Kelly, who had been there since '75, and you had this young lad coming straight on. Like, what a combination, you know, talk about extremes, and to just gel from day one.
Things were going quite well in that first half, and as such we were 4 points up, but then things just kind of changed.
An son daim sé géntrim, nar tugach seanstal líadóibh, stra cool a bhain get ceart as locht cuman luach le scoil.
Towards the forward off McCuttridge, yes! Antrim fighting for every ball. Offaly just not able to get their act together. Ball comes in talking McCuttridge! Magic McCuttridge! In comes Aidan McCarry. This could well be it. Yes! Oh, I don't believe it! A rocket that has put Antrim surely into the All-Ireland hurling final of 1989.
You just saw 50,000 people, you know, just roaring on. The Galways, the Tipperaries were there.
In ainoin gur bhíad hain bhí hís le ceannas na búna gan chuine bhós dar chuman luach le scail, has bain firní bháilí úlíocht agus measthar na berta dá géalaí córic. Chuig son in anis de Johnny Mata.
I was sitting in the dressing room for a while, and I said, there's no sign of anyone else coming in. Where are they gone to? But later on that night, when I was looking at the Sunday game, that I realised Offaly had done a guard of honour. It was a nice gesture, whoever thought of it and that. Maybe, you know, it's that kind of thing. Other counties never really feared Offaly. Maybe have looked at us in the kind of the soft way. You couldn't imagine any of the big three doing it. You know, Kilkenny or Cork or Tip.
Fénéidir nó chahéan, bhí fethe bliain caite ó bhóg bureau creibh a chúntaí, agus é de heist ortha bhín drásan go ráidir sais bog. Ach bhín deisiacha é sinna chur na cheart nuair a bhfuildir le séir chiaráin ag lethe ceannas a chúntaí.
Lads would have said that, you know, that's the town team, it's more of kind of a tea and biscuits, it's not the bacon and cabbage of the good solid country hurlers.
The Bourman getting in here, is there a goal on for Bo Regan, or is it a corner forward? Pat Murphy! Down is a chance of a score, yes! It's not, it's blocked down! It's gone out for a 65.
Agus an chluthe drúdum chun deirig, dálam Johnny ceach luach for faoi cheannaireacht ó hanan dúir bheora Paddy Kerwin.
Majority was at centre back, And he was there standing over the 65. And of course, Brian Whelan would have been in Joe's ear now and telling him this, that, and the other. Well, the next thing I went over, Kerwin comes and he hits Jim Error. He go, yeah, with that, he says. Puts down the ball, sticks it over the bar.
Kerwin rises, he drives it in, it's gone over! A beautiful paint! It's all over and Borough won the Offaly final. 1 goal in 12 to 1 goal in 11, but what a great performance.
The whole town is involved, or you like to think the whole town is involved. It goes on for the week.
Some people call me the space cowboy. Yeah.
Bhí clúir Johnny Reeve mar rinne a bhain tainmh as a saoil, agus bhí buinach beag ag cornmhic biúin na bliana 1993 le seo. Rivan dear a seachtaine, bhí ghlacha ag Johnny le cuireach an bainise, agus dearú diantaige greibh an dárad ar an lá chéine. Nuair a tháinig an cléithe le cheannis, ní raibh an tarna óige ach techt ar a réiteach féin ar an sáin in na raibhse.
To be honest with you, I didn't put in an awful lot of effort into it because I said, listen, well, if we could lose this, I'd be free to go back and there'd be no issue. And everything would be hunky-dory. Well, I've never seen two teams to try and lose a match as much as those two teams did. We won by a point. I said, right, I had the car down. The father gave me the car and I went down and I says, right, I'll come down and I'll come back up. I drove up to the wedding and had 2 or 3 or 4 pints at the wedding or whatever. Got that. Upped into the car the next morning. Mother and father came down with me. It was a humdinger of a match and I went to extra time and we ended up winning by 3 or 4 pints and it was absolutely marvellous. Years later, there was a friend of mine and he turned around and he says, your legend still lives on. And I says, well, what do you mean? And he says, oh, sure, you had to be put into a shower. You were that drunk, you had to be put into a cold shower and coffee had to be shoved down your neck and then you went down and you played a blinder, So it had taken wings. It's a story that I look back on and it'll depend on who I'm talking to, which story I'll tell them,
In 1994 bhí tine ar chreiceanna gíomháilí agus ag Johnny, agus iondar scris ar a raibh rompa chun cléith ceannis na hhéir na bhainteach.
Oh, a magnificent goal! Brilliant stuff by the faithful county! Oh, what a goal! That is a classic goal! Wexham man goes back to Cather's Hurley as Johnny Pilkington drives it in and puts it over the bar.
Johnny McInerney wanting and breaking it down. That's a great goal! It's Offaly who go through to the All-Ireland final in 4 weeks' time.
Welcome to paradise.
An lára bhín cléith ceannis, bhí Johnny ar an déile fís, agus ábhríonn béal scaoilte.
Well, for the first time since 1985, none of the big 3 of hurling, Tip, Cork or Kilkenny, are involved in this year's final. And people down in Offaly and Limerick will say there's no harm in that. Interestingly enough...
Unfortunately, with social media, all these things that should be buried in the relics of RTE should be left there. But unfortunately, they're brought up. And it's great that I have friends there as well that are able to put it up on social media for the embarrassment of it.
They previously showed Gary Kirby's interview where he spoke very well about the forthcoming game, and then the last question was, what will it mean in Limerick if they win this All-Ireland? And Gary went on to expand on how they're competing with rugby, and it was going to mean a lot of young players were going to pick up hurls and it was going to have a knock-on effect, positive effect in Limerick. And the same question was asked of Johnny.
What will it mean if Offaly can win a 3rd McCarthy Cup on Sunday?
It mean a hell of a lot of drinking, Obviously, I cringe. Obviously, it's in one way it's a real, stupid thing and immature thing to say. But at the same time, my frame of mind is that when you're training, when you're doing that, that's when you're tuned in. After that, listen, it's your own life. It's an amateur sport. It's not something that you have to answer to.
Ní bheith 16 jom den is idir Johnny agus an dúis mós na máníocht, agus bhí sé bramonína.
You probably would be more apprehensive if it was Cork, Tipperary or Kilkenny. We wouldn't have any fear of Limerick, they wouldn't have any fear of us.
Bhí aithne going gur imróir
an a chumasach Johnny agus dahí a Larna Park a rinne dahí an ober isiciúil agus Johnny rinne sé morráni maníochta agus an glóiseacht. Bhí mar go léirigh snú go mór le córach idir an cehar a coil Larna Park.
Bhí an tasach bevesa amó ag í bhailí. Ach, chyma Johnny san áir a bhí bliana chuid imirthe.
Nice skill, beautifully outside to Johnny Pilkington. Is this a point? It is. Pilkington's first.
An son bhór limnach buile mílt na chortha.
Lobbed in. Oh, that's a goal! Damien Quigley's got a second. O'Connor, who's replaced Mike Galligan. The shot from way out the field, and that's a point. His first shot and his first chance to shine.
It did look like, curtains as such, the momentum had gone.
Bhí bhailí cúig faointach an deirg nuair a dulmhigh Johnny Dooley a féin de foxéir. As son go deire, hála an cúigneom de samráití is tar na hamánaíochta.
Would he go for a point? I think he's been instructed to do so. He's going for a goal, and he's got it! A goal and 3 points. That's exactly what Offaly require. Offaly now feeling that they can turn the tide. But O'Connor's in. It's another one. It's another goal.
Offaly don't even know what's happening here, let alone Limerick. And now you have, right in front of the hill, you have the green, white and gold covered in the hill. They're going mad. You can't say we have the momentum now.
Bhí gach duine ag smaoinemh cad ba ceart doing a dhéanamh chun an sort momentum sin a stoppa ach in áiríre ní ramar in an éonrad dhéanamh.
Comes back to Johnny Pilkington, striving to take it up. Good vision, seeing that John Troy was free. Troy trying to tag on another point. It's over, yes! With 5 minutes left, it had looked good for Limerick, and now all of a sudden it's Offaly's match.
It's an incredible finish, and to an All-Ireland. You could play that match 10 times over and it wouldn't happen.
And Offaly has won, and it's all over. What a comeback. And Eamon Cregan has masterminded a famous victory. Johnny Pilkington, how he'll celebrate tonight, how he's entitled to.
Tréis an chluthe, bhí sealgairid ige Johnny a ggóluadar a athair ná dearúta sé go brach.
My father was a working man. He worked, he let us hurl, he let us play sport and this, that and the other. I remember arriving in, and, he was there and he just a great big hug after it, which was... totally different from what we had at that time. So, a very special kind of memory that in that, So.